In a forgotten industrial district on the outskirts of an old Midwestern town, the Dunning meat processing facility loomed like a dark cathedral. Its brick walls were stained with generations of blood, its floors slick with viscous, unidentifiable fluids. But beneath the harsh neon lights and the constant drone of machinery, there was a secret, a lineage steeped in horror, and a trade far older than the notion of mere meat cutting. It was here that a young girl was born into the macabre legacy of the butcher's granddaughter. They called her Maribel by name, though some in hushed tones whispered an additional title, the heir of carnage. As a child, Maribel roamed the grim corridors of the plant. The rhythmic clanging of cleavers, the ever-present metallic taste of iron, and the low, almost imperceptible murmurs that seemed to seep from the walls formed the soundtrack of her youth. The facility wasn't only a place where animals were slaughtered, it was a place where lives, both animal and human, merged into something unspeakably new. Her grandfather, known simply as the Butcher, was as much a creature of myth as the whispered rumours surrounding the plant. With hands stained permanently red from decades of work, he was the one who initiated Maribel into the dark arts of the trade. Under his watchful eye, she learned not only the skill of butchering, but the secret ritual behind each cut. A ritual whispered to unlock the forbidden consciousness hidden within flesh. Every dawn, before the first ray of light dared penetrate the soot-laden windows, the butcher would carry Maribel to a back room away from prying eyes. Here, among hanging carcasses and glistening blood pools, he would reveal his hidden ledger, a leather-bound book with pages stained deep maroon. Within its cryptic passages were the rites that bound living meat to a demonic will. He taught her how to recognize the living pulse in the meat, a subtle throb beneath the surface, a heartbeat drowned by processing machinery, yet unmistakable to those who knew how to listen. Maribel's early lessons were punctuated by both wonder and dread. In a stainless steel trough, she witnessed a slab of beef pulsate as if infused with its own dread life force. Her grandfather explained that the meat, the true product of their dark business, was not dead at all. It was a conduit for something ancient, something hungry for tribute. Over time, this awakened power would transform every cut into something more than nourishment. It would become a living, pleading entity. And the secret was that the meat had a voice. It begged, it cried, and it revealed secrets of exultation and damnation in the hush of midnight. As Maribel grew, so did her curiosity about the more unorthodox orders that began to arrive at the plant. The customer list extended beyond local restaurants and supermarkets. There were men and women, secretive figures cloaked in expensive suits, who demanded orders that defied explanation. They called themselves the devotees, individuals who craved a taste of the unearthly sustenance said to grant forbidden vigor, or a glimpse into realms beyond mortal pain. In hushed exchanges, the butcher revealed that these orders were not merely for flesh to be consumed. They were sacramental, intended to bind the eater's soul to the dark power lurking behind the glossy veneer of processed meat. One fateful evening after the rains had washed the city in a cold, slick sheen of water, Maribel found herself alone in one of the locked processing rooms. The doors had been accidentally left ajar. Drawn by a mix of dread and curiosity, she stepped inside and paused before a massive slab suspended in a vat of translucent, shuddering fluid. The meat seemed to writhe with an inner light, pulsing slowly as if trying to communicate a silent, desperate message. Her skin prickled with an inexplicable mix of revulsion and allure. In that moment, memories of her grandfather's tales flooded her mind, the whispered warning that one day the meat would demand a new host, a living sacrifice to become truly alive. And then, as if in response to her unspoken fear, the slab shuddered and split in one long, gleaming cut. From within emerged a shape that blurred the line between flesh and nightmare. It bore the semblance of a human form, a twisted mimic of life itself, but with features too contorted to be described by rational eyes. The creature's skin was marbled, almost translucent, revealing deep red arteries that pulsed in time with Maribel's racing heart. A voice like a distant, echoing sob surged through the cavernous room, not spoken but felt deep within her bones. The cycle begins anew, it seemed to say. In that eerie cadence, she understood. The dark art was not simply about survival in the conventional sense, but about transforming the essence of pain, loss, and desire into something altogether different, a perverse rebirth. Overwhelmed by the visceral horror and forbidden beauty of the moment, Maribel staggered backwards. She could almost hear her own heartbeat merging with the creature's slow, inexorable pulse. In that maelstrom of terror and raw, unadulterated power, she felt an unfamiliar tug, a call to embrace this legacy fully, to allow the blood and bone of her ancestry to merge with the living meat that swayed between life and death. That night, the storm battered the facility's derelict roof as Maribel's mind roiled with newfound purpose. Deep within the bowels of the plant, an ancient force was stirring, a presence that demanded acknowledgement and sacrifice. It was the dark heritage of the butcher's legacy, manifesting in a form as horrid as it was seductive. As thunder rattled the foundations of the plant, Maribel wiped away tears of both horror and revelation. She realized that she stood at the threshold of something monstrous and inescapable. The meat was not only a commodity, it was a living covenant with an ancient, insatiable hunger that only the purest form of sacrifice, her own transformation, could sate. The night ended with the sick, humid drip of unseen fluids and the distant, rhythmic pounding of a heart that seemed to echo from every shadow. Maribel now understood that the legacy she was destined to inherit was more than a trade. It was a dark calling, a relentless, pulsing force that would demand everything of her, warping her from a terrified girl into a being of infernal purpose. The next morning, Maribel didn't return home. She didn't call in sick. She didn't leave the plant at all. She had made her decision. She stripped off her apron and factory clothes and walked barefoot down the length of the blood-slick corridor that led to the subfloor, a section of the plant so old and disused even the oldest employees joked it was haunted. Her grandfather had forbidden her from ever entering. "You'll hear things down there," he once warned her, "but don't ever answer back." Now she wanted to hear them all. The stairs groaned under her weight. Rusted chains swung gently from overhead hooks. The air was thicker down here, sour like sweat trapped in a locked car. And beneath that, something fresher. Meat. But not the kind that's been chilled and processed. The kind that's still thinking. At the bottom of the stairs, she found the threshold room. It was no longer a slaughterhouse. It was a shrine. The floor was layered in dark, congealed fat, matted hair and broken teeth. Hanging hooks lined the ceiling, but instead of animals, they bore offerings. Flesh sculptures made from stitched organs, faces flayed from the jaw down and rearranged into grotesque spirals. A massive drain at the center of the floor pulsed, as if breathing, and from somewhere beneath it, something moaned. Not in pain, in pleasure. On the wall was a mural her grandfather must have painted in secret. A sprawling meat god with tendrils of intestine for limbs and a crown of rib bones fused to a weeping eyeless face. The title beneath read simply, "The Eater of Shape." Maribel stood before it, completely still. She had stopped shaking. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was hungry. The first sacrifice was small, a mouse caught in the dry goods closet. She slit it open with the ceremonial blade she found beside the mural and dropped it into the center drain. The metal beneath her feet hummed. The second was a feral dog that had wandered into the alley behind the plant. The third was a man. He was a drifter, high on something, loitering behind the dumpsters. She offered him warmth, a sandwich, a bed for the night. He didn't even scream when she caved in his skull with a meat tenderizer. By then, the urge had become ritual, a dance her body knew even if her mind didn't. The drain swallowed him whole, no trace left. And the cathedral below stirred. They came that night, the devotees. Her grandfather had fed them for years, she now understood, but it was her they'd been waiting for. She watched them descend into the subfloor in silent procession. Men in cashmere suits and blood-soaked bibs, women in satin robes and surgical gloves. One by one, they knelt before the mural, then bowed their heads to her. They called her Maribel the Carver. They said she was the meat bride, born of bloodlines traced back to the first temple built from bones and sinew. They brought gifts, raw flesh arranged like bouquets, jars of preserved tongues and knuckles, a human heart still beating in a jar of amniotic sludge. And they asked the same thing, each in turn. Feed us. She did. The feast was not a meal, it was a communion. Each plate she prepared twisted the devotees' faces into shapes of unbearable ecstasy and terror. One woman clawed at her own stomach until her intestines spilled out, laughing the entire time. Another man tore off his lips with a fork and screamed hymns into the raw cavity of his mouth. And still they ate. And from the drain, the meat god listened. Weeks passed. The plant became a prison of ritual. Maribel no longer slept in her apartment. She slept beside the drain, curled into its warm breath. Her skin grew pale and damp. Her hair fell out in clumps. Her eyes went milky white, but her vision became sharper, internal. She could see each person's organs the way a musician sees sheet music. The fat around their kidneys sang. Their stomachs whispered. She began to carve not for nourishment, but for revelation. And then her grandfather returned. He had vanished weeks before the cathedral first stirred, presumed dead. But now he stood in the doorway of the threshold room, a shadow of himself. Gaunt, eyes ringed in purple, lips split from cold. "You weren't supposed to go this deep," he rasped. "You woke it too soon." Maribel stepped forward, barefoot, apron caked in dried blood. "It woke me." His eyes darted to the drain. "You think it loves you? You think you're its chosen? It only feeds. You're meat to it, same as me." She looked down at her arms. Veins bulged, twisting into spirals. Her skin was hot, alive. She could feel the cathedral pulsing beneath the floor. Her grandfather had tried to harness it, but he was a vessel. She was an embodiment. "I'm not just meat," she whispered. "I'm its mouth now." She lunged. The blade went deep. Her grandfather gasped, staring at her in disbelief as she twisted the knife through his sternum and cracked it apart like overcooked ribs. His body collapsed into her arms, and she kissed his forehead one last time before dragging him to the altar. The drain opened wider. The god awoke. It rose not as a beast, but as a system, a network of tendrils and mouths and bone mirrors that stretched through the earth beneath the plant. It pushed its will into every devotee, warping their bodies into sculptures of flesh. Some fused together, others split apart. The air turned thick with rot and the iron-sweet scent of infinite blood. And Maribel, transformed. Her skin peeled itself back in strips, revealing glistening muscle that writhed with ecstasy. Her bones bent, reformed, and shaped into hooks and thorns. Her face was no longer human, it was divine. A choir of rib cages opened behind her like wings, and from her throat came a sound older than language. A feeding cry. When the townsfolk arrived weeks later, after the plant had gone silent, they found nothing but collapsed brick and torn metal. The facility was gone. But deep in the crater where it stood, they found meat. Not meat like pork or beef, meat with veins, with eyes. Meat that pulsed when they got close. One man touched it and lost his hand to something that bit from inside. And on the wall of the only structure left standing, an old freezer room still intact, they found one message scrawled in dried blood. "The butcher's granddaughter will return when the hunger calls." They burned the remains, but hunger always returns.